quick decision in a situation that was unplanned. No one knew it was forthcoming. My kudos, though, go out to Judge Schiffer. Really, the judge was under a lot of pressure from the news, from half the city, but she was very thoughtful in her approach. And she was right. No, either side was going to be entirely happy. Both sides were going to have some issues with it. But by and large, she was very fair throughout the trial. She was very fair in her sentencing, and she was very considerate of the feelings of the family of Mr. Reynolds, as well as the Tavon and his family. And now that's not just poppycock, but our condolences do go out to the Reynolds family. I mean, there's just a lot of suffering that goes along this whole case, suffering on the part of Tavon's family and Mr. Reynolds' family. And so, but listen, considering the fact that he started off charged with first-degree murder, facing life plus 20, we went to trial, got rid of the murder charges, and so for all those people out there who were talking about, oh, he was convicted of manslaughter, we got rid of those two at trial. We were left with manslaughter. The state was asking for 35 years. He ended up with 15 years, and the judge inviting us to come back to her on a motion to modify. And so, you know, things turned out quite well for him, going from facing life plus 20 years down to an actual sentence of 15 years, knowing that he's already got 1 year in, and another 2 years he'll be right where he is, youth detention center on Greenmount. And so we're happy with the way things turned out, considering everything.
Definitely relieved.
No, he's very pensive and quiet. I mean, he'll think about it as time goes on, and we'll go talk to him again. We've been in contact with him throughout. But that's the way he is. He's very quiet and pensive. His leg was shaking the whole time, you know, at the bench, as was the case during the course of the trial. But you know, as we discuss it and go over it with him even the more, I think he'll be fine. I have great hopes for him because he's a smart kid. Some of the classes he was taking over here and through the University of Baltimore, you know, were chemistry, calculus. I mean, he's a smart kid. If you just listen to him read, he's a smart kid. And you know, the sad part about it is there are a lot of Tavon Scotts out there, right? There are a lot of them. But they just get consumed like by their environment, much like parched paper is consumed by fire. And I'll never get the stench out of my nostrils from witnessing a kid that has so much potential, and he just gets caught up in that neighborhood. He gets caught up in that mentality. And so, but I'm gonna stay with him. I told him I'm never gonna leave him. I'm gonna stay with him.
That the case was a little racist profiling and
I feel like the case has some racial elements to it, and at some point it was racially tinged, but not the trial per se, but the way the facts developed, how Timothy Reynolds targeted these young people because he had a problem with what they were doing. He took the law into his own hands because he felt the city and the city leaders weren't doing enough, or at least enough to satisfy what he desired. And so he chose violence in this case. It was him, the adult in this case, the only adult involved in this case, decided that he was going to arm himself and do what the police wouldn't do what the mayor wouldn't do, and do what society wouldn't do, and that is commit an attempted first-degree murder or first-degree assault, however you want to call it. It's a felony. So he decided to choose violence because of his own personal feelings about squeegee workers and the lack of response, according to him, from the government. And that's why we're here, and I never want that to be forgotten about this case. That's the reason why we're here. Timothy Reynolds made a decision. The only adult decided to do something that a child would do, and the child is being held responsible for acting as an adult and trying to defend himself against a vicious attack by a 6'3", 329-pound, bat-wielding, alcohol-fueled man. And as you know, a bat is a deadly weapon, and it can be thrown and hurt somebody, it could be swung and hurt somebody, but Timothy Reynolds was a very imposing man. He could choke someone out right there in the middle of the street. Nobody would say anything. He'd turn around, get back in his car that was already running, and go home and have dinner with his family. And so, again, we tend to blame this child for having to deal with a situation that was tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving. And he was attempting to save not only his life, but the life of his comrades. And here we are today.
Mr. Roto, what aspects of this case are you looking to appeal?
I have, well, there are multiple, to be honest with you, but the thing that's most striking is the decision of Judge Dorsey in the circuit court. I do not believe that the reasons he chose to have this case tried as a juvenile have the merit that is sufficient to satisfy our appellate courts. I just don't. He made references to suspensions, having underage sex, skipping school, and experimenting with marijuana. Like, that's what teenagers do, and to me, that is unsatisfactory. And Warren really argued that point, so he'll probably want to add something to what I'm saying, but I do feel like that is the most fertile ground for a successful appeal. And then there were some things that came up throughout the trial, but I don't know if they're going to hold muster. They may not be enough to get us over the hump, but I do believe what happened in the Department of Juvenile Services and that juvenile court really provide the basis for a successful appeal.
I concur. Our issue was with Judge Dorsey's decision not to transfer the case to juvenile court. It should have been transferred to juvenile court. There's no question about that. And his reasoning really didn't follow the dictates of Davis v. State, which is a seminal case when it comes to transferring a person to juvenile court, which is public safety and amenability. And the reports indicated he was amenable, and they had programs for him that would enhance public safety. And even the judge here, Judge Schiffer, was looking for something more than just incarceration, and that's why she was glad to hear from the state's offering of the gentleman the doctor from Patuxent, because she's interested in the rehabilitative aspect of the correctional system vis-a-vis Tavon Scott.
Yeah.
So, good.
Clarifying question. I know that you had the judge put down the number of years.
Yes.
Just so we're clear, what are the number of years that we proposed?
It's 15 years executable time.
Right.
She gave him 10 years for the manslaughter case. She gave him 20 years to spend all but 5 for the handgun use in the commission of a crime of violence. And she gave him 5 years suspended, no executable time, for the possession of a handgun under 21. I think that's what it was.
That's right. And then 5 years probation.
And 5 years probation.
So essentially, it's 15 years. When he gets out, he's got 5 years probation.
5 years probation.
And the first 5 are without the
The first 5 is without parole.
Yes.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's exactly
Of
right.
which he served already one and some
Yeah,
change.
he served over 1, and he'll be there where he is now, detention center for another 2.
Right.
So by the time, if he has to go in the Division of Correction, we're hoping that that never happens because of the appeal, which should be before these 2 years are up. But he'll go in, if he has to go, having 3 years of essentially a 7-year sentence, half of 15, 7.5 years. So it won't be long before he's home, in the early 20s, and I think that he'll be fine when he gets out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anything?
First of all, I want to give my condolences to the Reynolds family. I want to thank my attorneys, first Rustolph Ito and Cynthia Banks, for putting together a very good, complex, and difficult case. This is a sad case. There are absolutely no winners at all. The Reynolds family, as you heard, they lost a father, they lost a brother, a husband, a best friend. We lost an individual born and raised in our city, a graduate of Poly High School who, like so many of us, loved the Orioles. And Mr. Scott, you see his mother, his family, they're hurting. So much promise with our young people. And unfortunately, that interaction changes everybody. No matter what you feel, the foundational piece of the problem was a young person with an illegal handgun. That was the problem. For us, we have to change that. We sit down and look at the court, what happened, the jury spoke, we understand that and we respect that. What we look at today was something that so many people hardly ever get to see, a juvenile waiver. See, there's no transparency with the juvenile court, so you got to understand things that we don't normally talk about. Number one, the juvenile system in our state is not set up in any way, shape, form, or fashion to deal with young people who are violent. That's unfortunate. You sat down, were able to hear from the expert talk about you get 6 months to 1 year. These young people need services. We're not trying to throw them away. But yet in the adult system, In the juvenile system, there aren't nearly enough beds. In the adult system, they have almost 300 beds. You have programs between 6 to 8 years where young people have the mental health treatment. They have the psychological treatment, the psychiatric treatment, social workers. They have the opportunity to get their high school diplomas. They have the opportunity to have real rehabilitation. Mr. Scott will be home. We'll welcome him with open arms. We'll make sure that he does the hard work. This is a sad situation. Nobody won. But at the end of the day, the judge spoke. It was a 35-year sentence, suspend all but 15, 5-year period of probation. What's interesting here, because she sentenced him on the manslaughter first, it's 10 years. You cannot do, if I'm not mistaken, my defense attorney days, you cannot do the 5 without in the juvenile system. So basically, I believe he'll probably receive almost 10 years before he'll be able to be released. He'll first do the 10 years, eligible for parole, on the manslaughter. Then he'll start the 5 years without the possibility of parole. But because he's in the Patuxent Youthful Offenders Program, if he's able to go ahead and matriculate through that program quickly, then he'll be able to be home even more quickly. This is, once again, a sad day. We have to hold young people accountable when they do violent actions. This isn't something that any of us ever want to do, but unfortunately it's something we have to do. Hopefully the message is loud and clear. Young people, if you're going to grab an illegal handgun and use that illegal handgun, you can and you will go to prison. It's not going to be your whole life sometimes, but when it is, you will be going to prison. Thank you.
Are you satisfied with the sentence? Do you wish for more?
Well, I am satisfied with the sentence, but the family lost a loved one. I know they're not satisfied. For us, we're about justice and accountability. So there's so many parts within this equation, but the judge spoke. That is a judge that has a great deal of experience, heard the case from the very beginning to the end, took into the facts of what happened on that fateful corner, and also took into facts this young person and having their opportunity, the brain develop, all the things we talk about. And the judge came up with something that she felt was fair. I always feel that if the defense and the state are never really happy, then that's the fair. And that was the right thing and the just thing to do.
Mr. Bates, and just for clarity, from my understanding, I heard of the juvenile waiver mentioned. Can you explain to me the process of that, obviously in conjunction with what the state does not have with our juvenile court system, how it applies in this case?
So whenever you have the opportunity, you're 18 or younger, 17, and you commit an offense in the adult system, you have the opportunity to file a juvenile waiver. That's to say the case should not be held or heard in the adult system, but the juvenile system. They had that hearing, but that hearing is basically the press, the community, no one can hear it. Because the defense was able to be successful and there was no first-degree murder, now they have the opportunity to have a second juvenile hearing. That is something that no one ever really gets to see because juvenile hearings are done. There's no transparency within juvenile court. Here you got to really hear the services. So often I think that individuals, they misconstrue what the juvenile system has. But here you got to see the juvenile system isn't equipped to deal with violent juvenile offenders, unfortunately. The adult system is, and the adult system is not throwing them away. But also you got to hear that this juvenile is not going to be quote unquote in a cage with adults. They're going back to YDC until they're 18 to be around people their own age, to continue the schooling, continue all those resources that the juvenile system has. But then when they get to the adult system, to have all those services, and they're not going to be in the division of correction near a bunch of violent killers. They'll be with young people who also have some of the same issues that they have.
Could Reynolds could have been charged for assault, attempted murder, in this case?
Well, Mr. Reynolds was murdered.
I understand that, but I'm saying
There never would have been attempt murder.
Could he been charged with attempted murder?
No, there was never an attempt murder. Now, maybe an assault, but you'd have to go ahead and have a striking. You could have maybe an attempt second degree. I understand where you get that from the defense. That's the defense's job, but I have to follow the law.
Do you believe that the lack of services that was discussed during the hearing today within DJS showcases the need for more services to be provided if we continue to see juveniles with handguns and commit various crimes?
Without a doubt. I think when you, based on the information you heard, that there was an opportunity to give this young man the services that his actions were clearly showing he needed. And there, look, We can all sit up there and talk and say what we want to say about DJS. You've heard it time and time and time again. Young people are out here because they screaming for services. DJS, we're part of the equation to make sure we protect the young people, to do the things that they need to educate them, to give the services, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together. All right, thank you.
Thank you.